Kasama po natin dito isang haligi ng Senado and a good friend to almost all the senators, all the senators, Mr. President, no other than former Senator Gregorio Honasan is with us. And we'd like to move to take up his budget, the budget of the Department of Information and Communications Technology. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. The budget of the DICT is in order.
And to sponsor the said budget is his Mista, also a distinguished colleague of ours from Cavite, no other than Senator Panfilo Ping Lacson. May we recognize Senator Lacson, and after which Senator Poe would like to interpolate.
All right. First, we welcome back to the Senate Senator Gregorio Gringo Honasan, and we recognize the Chairman of the Committee on National Defense and the Vice Chairman of the Committee on Finance, gentleman from Cavite, Senator Ping Lacson.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my pleasure to present the proposed budget of the Department of Information and Communications Technology for fiscal year 2021, amounting to a total of 14,139,746,000 only, distributed as follows, Mr. President. 13,493,360,000 for the Office of the Secretary, 11,670,000 for the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordination Center, 208,583,000 for the National Privacy Commission, and 426,133,000 for the National Telecommunications Commission. With that, I will wait for the interpellation from our colleagues, Mr. President.
You're not going to move for the approval right away? I am willing to bang the gavel just in case you do. Anyway, yes, who do we recognize, Senator Subiri?
First on the list, Mr. President, is Senator Poe. I'm sure it's friendly interpretation. Ano nyo po yan, macho, kasama adopted macho girl yan. May we recognize her, Mr. President?
Senator Grace Poe is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would probably support you, the hardworking, very astute senator from Cavite. Will yield to some questions, Mr. President.
Graciously to my seatmate and the adopted member of the Macho Black, Senator Grace Poe.
I'm not sure that's a compliment, but it's always good to be adopted by all the groups. Thank you, Mr. President. Sa panahon ngayon, talagang isa sa pinaka-importante ay ang internet natin kasi marami sa ating mga kababayan ang nagtatrabaho sa bahay at maraming mga estudyante, kung hindi lahat, nasa bahay rin at yung iba, kung hindi nagmo-module, ay gumagamit ng internet. Kaya yung usapin ngayon ay napakahalaga at importante. Ang ating pakay ay magkaroon ng mabilis, mura, at sana lahat may internet. So, kung sinabi nila, sana always, sana all. So, sa ating mga kababayan, ganito. Mr. President, the National Broadband Program is included in the new normal infrastructure flagship projects under the DICT. What phase of the project will be funded in the 5.9 billion proposed budget for 2020? And what is the status of this project and what is your timeline?
Right now, Mr. President, Your Honor, the department needs 18 billion pesos, more or less, or at least 18 billion pesos to complete the National Broadband Program. Unfortunately, BBM has only allocated 902 million pesos. Under the GAB, the House of Representatives augmented an amount of 2 billion pesos. And in the Senate version, not yet the Senate version, but in the committee report, Senator Angara, the chairman of the Committee on Finance, added another 3 billion. So there is now 5.9 billion pesos for the national broadband program. If we consider 5.9 billion pesos, it will cover phase 1 but up to Davao, but excluding regions 1 and 2 and some island provinces like Palawan. So again, I have repeatedly appealed to our colleagues to support the national broadband program because as you said, and rightly so, this is the new normal. Lahat umaasa sa internet connection, including DepEd, SUCs, and practically all government agencies. And if we augment or if we complete the funding requirements by augmenting the necessary amount, then we will have a very efficient internet service available to all government agencies, including local government units, Mr. President, Your Honor.
Actually, I agree, Mr. President. When I first saw the budget, I was actually quite confused because of the importance of internet at this time. Why did the NEP reduce it to 902 million? Almost like they didn't recognize its significance. So I'm glad that the Senate has actually increased it, if not fully restored the requested amount, but at least it's about 5 billion now. And so I thank also the secretary, the chairman of the finance committee, and also the good sponsor for at least restoring some of the badly needed funding for the broadband service. I would like to know also if the good sponsor can describe how will a national broadband service benefit us internet users? Ano ang magiging pagkakaiba pag ito ay na-establish?
Bukod sa magiging efficient, mako-cover lahat ng serbisyo ang mga government agencies, including mga local government units, Mr. President. So hindi na tayo nagkakaroon ng problema kapag tayo nagkakaroon ng webinar tulad ng ginagawa natin ngayon at hindi na tayo magsusubscribe. As mentioned by no less than the Senate President during my interpellations on general principles, ang ginagastos ng bawat opisina ng senador, sa atin, 24 tayo, sa loob ng isang taon, sa pag-subscribe sa internet service provider o yung mga telcos, nasa mga 2 million each at yung ating secretariat, 4 million. You can just imagine how much more is being spent by all the national government agencies and other GOCCs, SUCs, yung hindi pa kasama yung local government unit sa estimate na ang matitipid ng gobyerno kapag nabuo natin itong National Broadband Program, nasa mga 34 billion sa loob ng 5 taon. At sa unang taon, mahigit 700 milyong piso kagad ang ating masisave. So with an investment of 18 billion pesos for this year or for the next fiscal year, yun ang ating mabebenepisyo. Hindi na tayo matitipid natin yung halagang 34 billion pesos na hindi pa kasama yung matitipid ng mga local government units.
So, Mr. President, kailan ito magagamit halimbawa ng Senado? Kasi nagbigay kayo ng mga exceptions. For example, except Region 1 and another region, I think, and then Palawan. Kunyari sa Senado or dito sa Metro Manila, yung ating mga government offices, kailan natin ito magagamit?
Kung papopondohan natin at makukumpleto nila, ongoing yung phase 1, nasa NCR sila. So sa Senado, dahil nasa NCR ang Senado, mapapakinabangan natin ito. Pero kapag napuno natin yung pondong kinakailangan, sa loob ng isang taon kaya niyo i-operate. Hanggang kailan yun? Kapag pinondohan natin ng sapat ng 18 billion pesos, sa loob ng isang taon, kaya nilang ma-operationalize lahat ito. At tayo lahat hindi lamang tayo kundi yung mga nasa Region 1, Region 2, lahat na ng rehiyon, pati mga LGUs, makikinabang dito po. At yung buong national government, sabi ko nga kanina, 34 billion pesos kagad ang matitipid sa loob lamang ng 5 taon.
Actually, Mr. President,
Actually, 34 billion, 250 million.
I am actually inclined to propose the restoration of the entire amount that the DICT is requesting. On the other hand, if let's say we are not able to restore the full amount and give them the higher version nonetheless that the Senate is proposing, compared to the gap, which is 5.9 billion, ang sinabi ay nauumpisahan na at yung ibang mga phases ng broadband service, broadband infrastructure. So, kung hindi man mabigay yung buong halaga ngayon, susunod na taon, dapat nauumpisa na yun sa NCR. So, meron bang matatapos pa rin? Halimbawa, pwede ba natin maramdaman na may pagbabago at least sa serbisyo, tsaka kung sa Senado man, gawin natin halimbawa, pwede bang mag-umpisa na ito by next year?
That is correct, Mr. President. As we speak, actually, nagsisimula sila. But sabi ko nga kanina, sa 5.9 billion pesos, hindi masasama ang Regions 1 and 2. No? Pero may extend yung Phase 1 na nag-start dito sa National Capital Region hanggang Davao. Kaya lang, hindi lahat din makikinabang kasi yung mga local government units, yung mga ibang probinsya, kailangan gumastos sila ng sarili nila sa pagbili ng mga routers para makakonect sila doon sa itatayo nitong DICT sa halagang 5.9 billion pesos. Na ngayon, available na ito assuming na hindi ito magalaw sa BICAM at assuming din na hindi ma-FLR ng DBM.
So, Mr. President, baka by next year or half of next year, hindi na natin kailangan magbayad ng internet provider?
Hindi na po tayo magbabayad kapag nabigyan natin ng karampatang halaga yung DICT patungkol sa ating National Broadband Program. At hindi na tayo mamumroblema, mayroong nakakat, mayroong nawawala, kasi pagka mayroong nakat, isa lang hanapin natin, si Secretary Hunasan.
Mahirap hanapin si Secretary Hunasan kung ayaw niya magpakita, pero alam ko sa atin palagi siyang handang magpakita kung meron tayong tanong. So, yung
Madaling hanapin yan, Mr. President. Ilang beses na huli yan eh.
Oo nga pala, hindi nga pala.
I agree. Madaling hanapin si Senator Lacson. Si Senator Lacson na mahirap hanapin.
Oo nga pala, nalito ako doon. Yung sponsor nga pala, ang mahirap hanapin kung ayaw magpakita. Okay. So yung DICT, gusto kong tanungin sa ating, Mr. President, does the DICT believe that there should be a minimum internet speed for providers? For example, what is your recommended minimum internet speed?
Yes, they believe that there should be a minimum internet speed. Ang sa kanilang palagay, yung 27 Mbps, sapat na po yun. Allowable na yon na internet speed.
27
Mbps.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Mr. President, ganito, marami kasi sa kanila, mga telco companies, nag-a-advertise na ganito kabilis yung kanilang internet speed, pero hindi naman because it actually fluctuates a lot. So, in the better internet, establishing the 80-80 rule, which will require telcos to provide at least 80% of their advertised speed, 80% of the time. So, kung hindi nila magawa ito, 80% of their advertised speed at 80% of the time, how much penalty does the DICT deem just to impose on these telco companies?
As advertised. At present, Mr. President, Your Honor, 200 pesos per day They are recommending na increase ito sa 2 million pesos per day para talaga mag-deliver.
Paano natin magagawa yan na i-increase ng 2 million? Kailangan ba ng legislation or pwedeng regulation lang ng DICT through the NTC? Actually, isa pa yan na pag-uusapan natin ng NTC. So DICT muna, paano pwedeng i-increase? Kasi 200 pesos, walang matatakot doon.
Kailangan po ng legislation kasi yung 200 pesos per day, saklaw po ito ng batas.
So kailangan
Sa
natin
Public Service
i-amend.
Act. Public Service Act. So we have to amend the Public Service Act and to increase the penalty to be incurred by those telcos that fail to deliver the allowable internet speed, Mr. President.
So, Mr. President, not necessarily the definition of what a public service is. It could be a separate legislation that is focused on telcos and internet alone. Am I correct?
Yes, we have to amend the law, the Public Service Act, Mr. President, because the Public Service Act specifically mentions or states 200 pesos per day. So if we want to compel the telcos and impose heavier fines or penalties, then we will have to amend that particular provision, among others, Mr. President.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. President, the Public Service Act has something to do with the definition of what a public service is and basically liberalizing industries to allow foreign investments to come in. I'm not sure if there's a specific, I don't recall having the penalties for the telcos or internet speed there. Perhaps it is another, maybe it is more in the franchises that we grant. So anyway, nonetheless, since that's my committee, we will look into it.
Section 21.
Next is the...
Mr. President, Your Honor, it is under Section 21 of the Public Service Act. So if we, since we are now in the process of deliberating on some amendments of the Public Service Act, maybe we can introduce that particular amendment to increase the penalties. It is, I was just told, it is under Section 21 of the Public Service Act, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since the NTC...
And if I may add, Mr. President, Your Honor, kung sa 27 Mbps ang ma-deliver ng mga telcos as of now, kung minimum guarantee dyan, maganda yung video teleconferencing na may experience natin. That's an assurance from the ICT itself.
So, Mr. President, right now, what is the minimum internet, what is the average internet speed? Dito na lang natin gawin sa capital natin, sa NCR. Ano yung average internet speed natin? Alam mo, ito yung isa sa nais kong tanungin sa DICT kasi napapailalim sa kanilang NTC. Pero, alam na, mabait man sa atin yung namumuno ng NTC, pero ang dami ring kakulangan. Kaya, ano ba yung average ngayon na talagang tatamasa natin?
Well, sa tracking nila, pagka-fix, like tayo ngayon, naka-fix tayo, 26. Pagka-mobile, 16, which I don't believe. No? Of course, because sometimes we experience, and we have this app, na yung speed test. And more often than not, especially when we're moving, pag nagsusuka tayo ng speed, hindi nga tayo umabot ng 5. Isa na sa mga 3 or 4 lang tayo. But when they continuously track kasi, Mr. President, Your Honor, and yun ang kanilang result ng kanilang tracking. Pagka-fix yung gamit, 26 Mbps. Pero pagka-moving, nasa 16.
Mr. President, madalas nagkakaroon ng problema sa NTC kasi parang kulang-kulang yung data nila. Tapos madalas, hindi pa, pagka maraming mga reklamo, hindi naman nila natutugunan. Sila pa yung kailangan hikayatin na gumawa ng hakbang. Hindi proactive. So ano ba yung Ano ba yung opinion ng Secretary tungkol sa NTC? Anong pwede natin gawin para mas aktibo sila sa pag-monitor at pagbibigay ng parusa o multa dun sa mga hindi tumutugon sa kanilang responsibilidad na merong prangkisa ng telco? Kasi napakabilis magkansela ng ibang broadcast companies. Pero pagdating naman sa mga telcos, kahit na bagsak minsan ng serbisyo, eh hindi naman napupuna.
Yeah. Ang naging problema ay I was just told by the secretary, good secretary, na dapat government-led. Dapat na nagko-control talaga government. But as of now, sad to say, parang private sector initiative ang karamihan sa pagdating sa ating telecommunications. So doon tayo nagkakaproblema. That's the reason why we really have to empower the ICT and NTC, no, to take the lead. Because in this day and age of technology, especially in the midst of the pandemic, talagang puro internet service ang kailangan natin.
Yun na nga Mr. President. I believe that you can empower an agency, but if the agency does not use that power correctly or does not use that power at all, then wala naman mangyayari. Kasi alam naman natin ang NTC in particular, they're really slow to respond to complaints, and then sometimes they don't even have the correct data. If you give them more authority, I don't even know they'll actually use it to the advantage of the agency or the people that it's supposed to serve. So I hope that the secretary will take time to evaluate the performance of the National Telecommunications Agency to make sure that they're actually performing their task of monitoring internet speed in the country. Now,
With their
going
help, Mr. President, Your Honor, with their help, maybe there's a need for us to revisit Republic Act 7925. Medyo out of date na rin tong batas pagdating sa telecommunications, yung sa policy sa telecommunications. So, 1995 po ito. Kaya we may need to revisit the law and amend to conform with the present times, Mr. President.
I agree, Mr. President. I think that that's one of the things that we are really going to have to focus on. In Bayanihan 2, of course, together with Senator Drilon, especially Senator Drilon as a principal sponsor of the provision, we included in Bayanihan 2 a provision to fast-track the construction of both telco and internet infrastructure. My question now is, since then, since Bayanihan 2, in fact, even Bayanihan 1, but more in Bayanihan 2, how many new towers have we constructed? How many permits have been given since then? Because we're supposed to cut the number of permits, di ba? Ilan na lang yan? I think 3 na lang yata. Ilan na yung nadagdag natin ng mga cell towers?
Ilang new towers ang nadagdag? Tapos ilan yung existing? In addition to how many?
With the permission of Senator Paul, can I elaborate on that point just a bit so that we can have a complete?
Senator,
Yes.
Yes,
With
by
the
all
permission-
means, Mr.
Yes.
President.
Yes.
Just to respond first to the question of Senator Po, with the indulgence of the minority leader.
Yes.
Just to answer the question, ang nadagdag 1,200 in addition to the existing 10,000.
Mabilis yun. Marami na yun. Sige, thank you. I will yield to Senator Drilon.
Just on this point, thank you very much, Senator Paul. As cited by Senator Paul, we indeed post in Bayanihan 2 the suspension of all permits required except for 2, and that is the building permit by the Office of the Building Official pursuant to PD 1096 or the National Building Code of the Philippines and the height clearance from the Civil Aviation Authority. Other than these two, we suspended all permits for the next 3 years in order to respond to a complaint of about 36 or 35 permits for every cell tower. So the question of Senator Poe is very appropriate, just to check as to where we are today. To start with, how many cell towers must the country have in order to have an efficient system? I must assert, Mr. President, that today I have not felt any improvement. In fact, dati po hirap ka kumuha ng linya, ngayon makakuha ka ng linya, wala nang sumasagot sa kabila. So it has not improved at all. So the first question that I would like the answers for the record is, how many cell towers should the country have in order to have an efficient system, given the number of internet users and cell phone users?
The ideal numbers would be 70,000 towers, Mr. President. So we need an additional 50,000 towers, more or less, no, or cell sites, to have ideally 70,000.
70,000.
Right now we have more or less 20,000, so we need 50,000. And as an output of the Bayanihan Act that we passed, napabilis yung wala nang permitting issues, Mr. President, Your Honor, dahil over a period of 4 months, nakapagdagdag tayo ng towers na 1,200.
Okay, thank you, Senator Lacson. Okay, we need 50,000 towers more. May we know the program as to when the 50,000 can be completed, given the fact that there are no more permits, actually no more permits necessary. So, and now it becomes a question of capital investment on the part of the telecommunications companies. So how many more years down the road do we see in order that we can fill the gap? It requires us, yes.
If ma-maintain natin yung status quo sa Bayanihan na wala ng permits, at the rate we're going, mag-speed up talaga, Mr. President, yung construction ng mga towers. Because sabi ko nga kanina, over a period of 4 months, nakapagtayo ka agad ng 1,200 towers. So it will increase its speed, in the construction if the Bayanihan provision stays, Mr. President, even without an emergency situation.
Mr. President, we suspended the permits for the next 3 years because in consultation with the industry when we were crafting those provisions, when I asked them, all right, we'll suspend the permits, how long a period do you need in order to come to in order that we can be at speed insofar as the cell towers are concerned? They said 3 years. So the suspension is effective for 3 years. So the question is, can we finish 50,000 towers in 3 years, or approximately 17,000 a year? Huh? Di ba? Yeah.
Before you answer the distinguished sponsor, aren't we at the mercy of the telcos? Eh kung ayaw nila magtayo, well, ideal is 70, all right, and we need 50 more. Eh itong mga telcos kung nagtitipid, like what they have been doing in the past, na pagtitipid, because in Indonesia, with more than 200 million population, the cell sites in Indonesia is more than 100,000 cell sites.
In Indonesia, Mr. President, just to add to the data, Indonesia has 1,554 users per cell site. The Philippines has 4,258 users per cell site. That's why it's very crowded. Vietnam,
Kaya nga.
President, Vietnam has 711 users per cell site. China has 408 users per cell site. Ours, I repeat, is 4,258. And that is why I do not know what ratio we're looking at, but I suspect about what, 2,000? Is it 2,000 percent? There are 70,000 estimated. How many is, I don't know how many.
It will be better than in Indonesian numbers in that case because, as I said earlier, out of 200 million population, 100,000 ang cell sites sila. Tayo, 100 million, ang cell sites natin at present is less than 20,000. Hati pa yung Smart at Globe doon, ha? Doon sa
Yes.
less than 20,000 na yun. So, as I said, aren't we at the mercy of the telcos? Eh kung ayaw nila magtayo, ang palusot dati, mahirap daw permit. Eh, binobomba raw ng NPA. Nagbabayad sila. Ayaw daw ng mga villages, ayaw ng mga association. Yun ang mga palusot dati.
Well,
Ayaw ng barangay.
The Senate President couldn't have said it more correctly or more aptly, Mr. President, because according to the ICT, if we are able to finance the 18 billion requirement, yung telcos na magsusubscribe sa gobyerno, hindi na sila kailangan magtayo pa mga towers, antena na lamang kasi fiber na ito.
Yun.
So we invest 18 billion and instead, aside from the savings of the government in the amount of 34 billion pesos at least in the next 5 years, meron pang kita ito because the telcos, the private telcos, will now be subscribers.
I agree.
Sa
I
ngayon,
agree.
tama po ang Senate President because we are at the mercy of the private telcos. Because lahat po ito private initiative eh. Magtayo ng towers, yung mobile companies. Pero pagka gobyerno yun ang may control, that's why I have been insisting, Mr. President, from day one when we deliberated on general principles that we set aside 18 billion pesos. Right now, we have 5.9, courtesy of the House of Representatives and the Senate. No? Ang 5.9 billion, sabi ko nga kanina, phase 1. Kung maka 8.9 tayo, madadagdag yung Romblon, Panay Islands, Palawan. Tapos pag nag 12.9, ito yung graduated level ng improvement. May include yung regions 1 and regions 1 and 2 plus yung IP radio sa Basulta, no. But if we complete the funding requirement, no, mapuna natin, the telcos, the private telcos will now be at the mercy of government, no. Because there will be subscribers because fiber na po ito. Antena na lang yung wala na silang reason para hindi mag-deliver. That is the situation we are in right now, Mr. President. So again, Senator Honasan, through this representation, is pleading with our colleagues to please support the appropriation of 18 billion pesos. So mayroong 5.9, dagdagan na lang natin ng para mapuno na yung 18 billion pesos. And those will be the benefits na over a period of 1 year. So after 2021, we will experience a better internet service.
Mr. President,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Senator Po, for giving me the time. Yes, I'm through with my intervention.
Go ahead,
thank you all.
Senator Grace po.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the minority leader for clarifying all of this, and for reminding the DICT, the NTC also, that they really have to monitor the number of permits, in fact, have been slashed. So there should be less obstacles for the telco companies to set up On the other hand, as I
Excuse me,
mentioned,
Your Honor, if I may respond to the question of Senator Drilon, kasi suspended for a period of 3 years yung mga permits, ang may tatayo nila rito nasa mga 18 to 20,000 towers more.
so, Mr. President, kung, from the very beginning of this plenary debates, I already manifested that we should restore the full amount that is being requested by the DICT. I think that this is really necessary. Now, my question is, so if we give the full amount, Mr. President, they would be able to simultaneously construct by next year the broadband network for fiber,
They can, Mr. President.
so they can absorb that amount.
Simultaneous, yes.
Okay. Mr. President, there's a bill that I proposed, the Better Internet Bill, and I think it will address also our concern about penalties, because we will be increasing penalties for non-compliance from 200 pesos to 200,000 pesos to 2 million a day. So I think this is also one bill that we can fast track so that it will be more encouraging for the telco companies to comply. Now, since we are discussing already internet speed, one of the promises of a third, fourth telco player that has come in, particularly Dito Telco, is that they will be able to provide better internet service, and because of that, they made promises of delivering certain number of towers, etc. I'd like to know, is the DICT evaluating the compliance of Dito Telco? Have they already, are they on track to meet their 2021 January deadline? Because by March, they should be compliant with the first phase. Otherwise, they will have to forgo a certain amount in penalties in their escrow, Mr. President.
Yes,
Ano
Mr.
na ginagawa
President.
na dito?
Tanong niya. Yung dito, Mr. President, so far, okay naman daw. Has reported the following accomplishments. They're able to locate close to 3,000 sites for their overall rollout operation. They have completed they're in the process of constructing a total of 806 towers out of 1,686 towers, or 47.8% of its target as of March 2020. Thus, the construction of towers, data centers, access sites are in progress. Tapos they also entered into a joint pole and co-location agreements with various companies and cooperatives under the Common Tower Initiative of the GOCCs, private companies and LGUs. Now, as an addendum, Mr. President, let's not over-rely on private telcos, Mr. President. Again, I'm afraid I'm sounding like a broken record here, but we have to support the National Broadband Program para government can take the initiative in all these endeavors, instead of being at the mercy of the private companies, private telcos. Kailangan natin meron namang bill ito. Now, they're proposing a national digital infrastructure bill, which I suppose they are prepared to give us a legislative proposal. This will institutionalize the national broadband program of the government, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, I agree with the good sponsor that we shouldn't really rely on these private telco companies. On the other hand, these private telco companies have made certain promises to us that they will be able to deliver a minimum internet speed, and then part of that promise is that they will be able to construct 2,500 cell towers, 37% coverage I think by March next year. So may I ask if they're on track, if they're able to cover underserved areas and at least have 37% coverage by next year?
So they're on track on the 70%. As we speak, Mr. President, Your Honor, they're on track, ano? Because nakahanap na po sila ng mga location sites. Kailan? Ang unang audit sa kanila, Mr. President, Your Honor, is this coming January.
I think that we need to be apprised of that because, as you know, I will schedule a hearing soon for actually, Dito is requesting for another franchise renewal because theirs will end in 2023. And of course, before we can really consider, we need to be able to see what they have delivered so far. So I think that we should really look into it before we agree to extend their franchise for another 25 years. And also there will be some penalties for them if they're not able to deliver by March next year. So, Mr. President, I would like now to move forward, and so yun yung mga to move forward and ask about the DICT has a project called Tech for Ed. Is it true that Tech for Ed was not granted its budget request and was even decreased from 363 million this year to a mere 115 million next year? Kasi under this program, the DICT sets up digital learning centers and distributes digital learning equipment like laptops, Wi-Fi devices, which is really necessary right now that a lot of the kids are doing distance learning and a lot are working from home. So I believe that there's even a budget request of about 3.44 billion for a program called the Digital Learners Project. This project, I'm told, aims to equip about 500,000 students and 25,000 teachers with laptops, pocket Wi-Fi devices, and other gadgets needed. And yet this program received zero funding for 2021. Aren't these programs necessary? And is there a way that we can restore a budget for this?
We can, Mr. President. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, the amount requested was not considered under the NEP. So, but yes, we can provide appropriations in the amount of, magkano lang? 100. Ang kailangan lang nila rito, 100 million.
Hindi, at 300,
Yeah. 100 million lang ang naibigay sa NEP, Mr. President.
oo nga, baka pwede naman natin dagdagan kasi ang daming may kailangan ng mga, well, kailangan ng digital learning centers, kailangan ng mga,
3.4 billion. Lalong wala ito.
baka pwede pa natin taasan ng konti yan. Kasi imagine, no, 500,000 students, 25,000 teachers will be given laptops.
Yeah, Mr. President, ang requirement dito is 3.4 billion yung sa digital learners and teachers projects, Mr. President. Unfortunately, yun nga, 100 million lang binigay ng DBM.
Baka naman pwede natin taasan kahit parang insulto naman yung 100 million, di ba? Administration costs pa lang. Wala ka nang mabibili ng mga laptop niyan eh.
True to form, and DBM is just being consistent. For a budgetary requirement of 18 billion, nagbigay ng 900. So wag na tayo magtaka na yung 3 billion binigyan ng 100.
Alam mo, Mr. President, habang nandyan yung ating colleague, bago bumalik dito sa Senado in less than 3 years, siguro dapat lahat ng mga projects na ganito na pwede natin ipagkatiwala na matugon, ay dapat ngayon pa lang ibinibigay natin na kilala natin ang nakaupo sa DICT. Yes. Anyway, one of the laws that I sponsored and passed and authored, Mr. President, is the free public Wi-Fi project for public places for SUCs. This will receive a budget of 3.72 billion. This is inclusive of an additional 1 billion due in the Senate version. Now, Mr. President, kailan po tayo magkakaroon ng libreng internet sa mga public transportation terminals? This is provided for in the Land Terminal Improvement Act, which I authored and sponsored in the 17th Congress. So dun sa mga land terminals or dun sa ating mga transportation terminals, meron na ba tayong free internet doon sa mga lugar na yon? I think part of the cost should be shouldered also by the operators of the terminals, but have they been wired? Have they been made? Are they capable of actually providing the service?
Here's the situation, Mr. President. The NTC is charging user fees, spectrum user fees. From 2014 to 2019, ang total collection na nito, kasi under the law, merong collection nito na meron dapat ibayad, 18.575 billion. With an average collection of 3 billion more or less, at least 3 billion a year. Now, as of December 2019, may balance pa itong 5.9 billion. More than enough to cover the shortfall. Kasi ang kailangan ng DICT rito, ng DICT for the free internet access, including SUCs, an additional 3.265 billion pesos para matotal yung 6.35 billion. This is to cover an additional 5,100 sites for free Wi-Fi and maintain the existing 10,069 sites. So they need an additional 3.265 billion, and there's an available 5.995 billion na nakolekta sa spectrum user fees. Ang problema, yung DBM, nag-cap sila ng 2.7 billion sa GAA. And for 2020, we inserted a special provision because DBM cannot do that. Under the under Republic Act 10929, this is a special law, Pre-Internet Internet Access Act. Hindi pwedeng pakialaman ng DBM. In fact, Mr. President, under that law, pag kinulang yung requirement ng doon sa nakokolekta sa spectrum user fees, pupunan dapat ng DBM by way of GAA. But as we know now, instead of augmenting the budget, yung shortfall ng collection sa user fees, kinap nila sa 2.75. So nagkukulang ngayon. And there's an available, as I said, 5.9 billion pesos. So this subcommittee is planning to recommend to the Mother Committee, again, to insert a special provision to provide the necessary amount para hindi na tayo magdadagdag sa GAA, Mr. President. Kasi kung nanghihingi na sila ng kapunuan para sa 18 billion, maghihingi pa rin sila ng pampuno sa free internet access ng mga yung sa open spaces, including SUCs, 3.265 billion pa yon. So we can just do it by way of a special provision, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I'd like to clarify, sino nagbabayad ng spectrum users fees? Like, ano yung mga, kunyari sa bus?
Lahat po na may frequency.
So,
lahat po ng gumagamit ng frequencies na inisyu ng NTC.
Hindi, kasi dapat, di ba, dapat kaya nga free Wi-Fi in public spaces.
Except broadcast, Mr. President.
Okay, so yung mga tayo kunwari, pupunta tayo sa isang plaza or terminal na dapat may free internet access. Hindi tayo nagbabayad. So ang nagbabayad noon, either munisipyo, yung local government, ganun ba? Or
yes.
Tama?
Or the national government.
Or the national government. So kunyari doon sa mga bus kunyari doon po sa mga bus terminals, sino nagbabayad doon?
Pag nag-provide ng free Wi-Fi yung telcos, courtesy nila, edi libre, Mr. President. Pero kung wala, ang magsusubscribe doon yung either the local government unit or the national government.
Okay, so dapat din talaga kung ano yung collectible nila for being able to provide the service, eh mabayaran, di ba? Para magamit nila uli yun and expand the
Investment.
service.
Yeah.
Opo.
Para
So,
ma-reinvest nila, Mr. President.
So, Mr. President, in this discussion today, just to summarize what I would like to ask from the committee, um, number one, I'd like to have the deliverables that were fulfilled already or not fulfilled by Dito Telco. I would also like to recommend, of course, the amendment of a bill to increase penalties for telcos for not being able to provide the service that they advertise or a minimum service. So in Section 21 of the Public Service Act, or also in the Better Internet Bill, which we are pushing for. And lastly, Mr. President, I would like to reiterate also my point that we need to increase the budget of the DICT, at least to provide the full amount that they are asking for the national broadband service. Kasi nga, tama yung sinabi ni Senate President, we cannot rely on the telcos alone. And if we can actually have the telcos depend on also or be able to rely on government infrastructure, I think that would also be better because the government will have extra income by way of that. So yun nga sinasabi, 34 billion ang matitipid natin. Ang hinihingi lang nila, 20 billion, 34 billion in bali bawing-bawi na kaagad yung hinihingi nilang funding. So ibigay na natin yon. Yung isa pa, yung Tech for Ed na ating itinutulak kasi para yan sa mga estudyante. So kung ngayon importante sa pandemyang ito na magkaroon tayo ng suporta sa kalusugan, suporta sa trabaho, hindi magkakaroon ng suporta dun sa trabaho kung hindi natin aayusin itong internet na ito. Gaya nga ng sinabi ko, sana mas mabilis, sana mas mura, at sana lahat meron, sana all. So with that, Mr. President, I am very supportive of the DICT's request for an increase in their budget for next year. I think this is necessary, and with the help of the Macho Block, which I actually would like to say is an honor to be considered, even if I don't have all the macho qualities. I would like to push for an increase in their budget. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the sponsor of this.
Thank you, Your Honor, for your very significant and remarkable intervention in this regard. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Next to interpolate is Senator Drilon, the Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Will the gentleman continue to read for a few more questions from where we left earlier in our intervention during the time of Senator Paul? Will the gentleman yield a few more questions?
Of course, to the distinguished Minority Leader.
Mr. President, I concur with the proposition that the government should fund the cell towers and let the telecommunication companies rent, because of the very high capital outlay requirement, as pointed out by Senator Soto. It may, oftentimes we are at the mercy of the telecommunication companies. And my understanding is that one cell site or cell tower would cost something like, what, is it $25,000? Can the good sponsor confirm that from the industry? How much would it cost to put up one cell tower?
Mga 50. Around 15 million pesos, Mr. President. 15
million pesos, yes. And therefore, as correctly pointed out by Senator Soto, it may not, we're at the mercy of the capital outlay of the telecommunication companies. Of course, that is why there is so much pressure to open up and remove the monopoly in this area. We do hope that this can be given a push. But going back, yes, I am in favor of the government taking over the putting up of cell towers, and the telecommunication companies will just rent. But did I get correctly the statement of the good sponsor that we need 18 billion pesos to come up with with enough cell towers?
NBP, National Broadband Program, 18 billion pesos all in, Mr. President. And that's just for fiber, no? That's just for fiber, Mr. President.
Okay.
Wala pa yung mga tinatawag na missionary towers because there are some areas that the private telcos are not willing to invest, like yung mga bundok sa Bukidnon, yung mga malalayang lugar. So government should come in and fill in the gap, Mr. President.
I think we just have to let our majority leader fill in the gap in Bukidnon, Mr. President. In any case, yes, I agree with that proposition for government to fund this, but it would appear that the DBM is not convinced of this proposition, but on the other hand,
Ba't ba hindi ma-convince yung DBM?
on the other hand, I suspect that the DBM, in its usual standard, is looking at the absorptive capacity of the DICT. The DBM approved budget is around 82% less per our computation, 82% less than the proposed budget of the DICT as originally submitted. While the proposed budget is 46.645 billion as proposed by the DICT, the approved budget in the NEP is only 8.14 billion. Is that a correct statement, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
It's really, but on the other hand, as of October 2020, our research indicates that the DICT obligation rate is only about 18% and the disbursement rate of 36%, for a total unobligated balances amount of about 6.6 billion pesos, which, if you ask the DBM, would be the reason why they could not give the entire amount that is requested for, because of the absorptive capacity of the agency. Can we have your comment on this, Mr. President?
They have improved on their obligation rate. Nasa 25% na sila ngayon from 18%, Mr. President. And they promise to improve or fully obligate yung kanilang budget.
Okay. Of course, if we are going to, we are convinced of the need for a additional budget, but then I am not yet convinced of the absorptive capacity of the agency. We do hope that our former colleague can whip up the bureaucracy into line and disburse what is appropriated for them, because of the very tight fiscal situation that we are in today. Sayang naman that we appropriate funds which cannot be used. Now, let's leave it at that. Just a few more points. How much is the cost of the damage to the ICT infrastructure as a result of the, how many, 3 or 4 typhoons that visited us just for the last 2 months? Because I'm sure our internet services were affected by the recent typhoons. In fact, we in the Senate, while we were deliberating on this budget, suffered several glitches while we are deliberating, and we have to ask for ayuda from the DICT. So may we know how much damage, if there's an estimate, to the ICT infrastructure because of the damage?
PDNA is still ongoing, Mr. President. The post-disaster needs assessment, they're still conducting it along with other agencies, Mr. President.
And as of now, there is no estimate a month after all of this.
It's still ongoing, Mr. President, because they will have to ask also the telcos on the extent of the damage
Mhm.
brought by the typhoons.
Okay, so we have no, which fund do we look at in order to respond to the damage to government in public infrastructure, if any, because of the typhoon?
Sorry, Mr. President, I didn't quite get it.
Yeah, is there any standby fund where we can source the needed funds to repair whatever damage was caused to our infrastructure because of the typhoon? Or
There is none,
there-
Mr. President. There is none,
Is-
Mr. President.
Is there a need, or is all answered for by the private sector?
Well, maybe they can ask support from the private sector, Mr. President. But as soon as they get the assessment, the post-disaster needs assessment, then they will provide us a copy, Mr. President. But as of now, there's no provision for to reconstruct the whatever damage is caused by the typhoons, Mr. President. They actually have requested an emergency fund of 2 billion pesos, but it has not been acted upon yet, Mr. President. Maybe national government is also waiting for the PDNA to be submitted.
Yeah, all right. That's not unusual because there are so many requests which are unacted upon. On the other hand, DBM is saying that many agencies have not been able to use the funds available to them. In any case, Mr. President, we leave it at that. And I think it is the primary interest at this point is to improve our internet services and through the construction of towers, because we are really lagging behind the rest of the world insofar as internet speed is concerned, insofar as the services of the telecom companies are concerned. We do hope that when we talk again about the DICT budget next year, under the leadership of our former colleague, Secretary Honasan, we can see some improvements in this area. And let's say 12 months, we look forward to a more efficient service, Mr. President, in the ICT sector. Thank you very much, Senator Lacson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Senator Villanueva is asked to be excused. He's still in Bulacan. Senator Cayetano is next online. But it's only Senator Marcos who's logged in. So after Cayetano, Go, Recto, Marcos, Gordon. Senator Marcos is recognized.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Senate President, my majority leader, and also to the chairman of the ICT Defense, Senator
Si Ralph
Lacson.
pala, dyan na.
Andiyan na po.
No, but he just logged in. It's okay. We already recognized you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Senate President. To proceed, I am a little bit confused about the numbers that the ICT needs. Let me say at the outset that we extend full support to the development of a truly broadband network that is national and free and reliable. Magkano ba talaga yung kailangan? Kasi meron tayong narinig na 18 billion kanina that should be spent on the telco towers. But I recall, Senator Lacson, that during a DICT hearing, Secretary Honasan told us that they had originally requested 46 billion for broadband. So I was just curious what are the actual sums found in the wish list of the ICT? Kahit po suntok sa buwan, libreng managinip.
The 46 billion mentioned by Secretary Hunasan would include yung mga provincial networks, including yung mga middle mile, Mr. President. So yung basic, 18 billion actually yung requirement nila.
So yung 18 billion kasama na ng 46 billion? Yung
Kasama sa
18 billion.
46.
Ah,
Yes,
so
Mr.
yung 18 is
President.
18 is a part of that. Yung tunay na kailangan nila, kumbaga wish list, yun yung 46 billion na yung ending, ang naibigay lang 4 billion lamang. Yun ang rinereklamo at dinadaing ni Senator Hunasan noon.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes. The reason is that kung titignan po natin, yung 46 billion, hindi naman napakalaking halaga. At kagabi, mahaba pong diskusyon. And I'm in full agreement po with Senator Recto mentioned last night with regards to DepEd,
18.
na maari naman siguro natin ilipat na sa unprogrammed yung mga kulang-kulang na performance ng iba't ibang department, katulad ng paborito po ninyo, napakaraming utang na foreign loans. Perhaps the DPWH, the huge loans that are found in the DOTR, the DOH, we know full well that they have used less than a quarter of these loans. So they should all be moved to the unprogrammed sector, these foreign assisted loan proceeds, and then we get a large chunk of fiscal space to accommodate that 46 billion that the ICT needs. That's one effort that we can do. Pinagtatakahan ko lang kung bakit yung unprogrammed sa Senate version binawasan pa. Let's not do that. Hayaan natin na yung unprogrammed remains the same, but let's put in that space the DOTR, DPWH, DOH, yung mga alanganin, hindi naman nila nagagastos year on year. I don't know what my good sponsor thinks of that possibility.
I agree with the lady from Ilocos Norte, Mr. President. Pag 46 billion, abot na ito hanggang Batak. Hanggang doon sa barangay sa Batak. Kasi parang we can liken it into Maharlika Highway, halimbawa, ano.
That's
yung
right.
requirement sa 18 billion, Maharlika Highway, pero all the way hanggang Mindanao. Pero kung kailangan natin talagang kompleto, papuntang mga provincial, municipal, yun yung 46 billion, Mr. President.
Oo, yung 46 billion. So yung isang naisip ko nga, ilagay na lang sa unprogrammed, kahit 3/4 of all those loan proceeds from foreign assisted projects in the very low performing, as it were, departments perhaps or agencies, ilipat natin doon. Tapos gawin na natin priority, seryosohin na natin itong 46 billion ni Senator Hunasan. The other aspect that I'm thinking of, kapipirma lang ng RCEP at pumunta si Presidente sa ASEAN, the big effort of Vietnam, which is now the #1 ICT ASEAN country, is to get foreign investment and funding. A great deal of their ICT industry, which is now a quarter of their GDP, really derives from foreign investment. And they have ICT zones, they have ICT investments. Ang luwag-luwag nila magpapasok ng iba't ibang investor. Perhaps this is another mode, because if you remember, Vietnam was one of the last to enter the 4G space. Now, they don't want to suffer the consequences of their laggardly behavior with 5G. They've invited all sorts of investors and technical companies to come in. And I think that's an option with RCEP and with the ASEAN collaboration na aggressive po tayo, which of course impinges on CREATE. What are the thoughts of our sponsor, please?
Yes, Mr. President, we'll have to discuss this with the chairman of the Finance Committee, and the suggestions expectedly coming from the distinguished lady from Ilocos Norte will really enhance the accomplishment of the ICT in this regard, Mr. President.
I think to date, unlike Vietnam, which was 4 or 5 ICT eco zones, wala naman ni isa dito sa Pilipinas. And that would be a big boost also. In addition to coming up with our own cell towers, in addition to finding our resources in the NEP and in the budget, perhaps opening up further to foreign investment, giving special incentives to ICT, which we so direly need, like Vietnam has, is another option po. Because we're all desperate to get decent Wi-Fi. Binabanggit lagi as one of the build flagship projects, yung national broadband. Meron ba nakukuha ang build yung national broadband, or talaga napako na tayo dun sa 5 billion?
As of now, it
Parang
remains
wala
at 5.9 billion, Mr. President. So with with the help of our colleagues, Mr. President, and all the way to the BICAM, probably we can augment the required budget of the ICT.
The other problem is, as we know well, the free Wi-Fi in public spaces does not in fact include Wi-Fi inside the school. So perhaps that's another area that we need to work. Kasi nasa park yan, nasa public space, sa government, pero doon sa loob ng eskwelahan, wala namang free Wi-Fi program.
Kasama po yung SUC diyan sa internet access.
That's right. Yung SUC kasama, pero yung primary and secondary and elementary at saka high school, wala naman sila.
Well, kung mabigay sa kanila yung additional 3 billion plus, then mga SUCs makakasama doon sa mga open public spaces, open spaces, Mr. President, para sa public Wi-Fi.
Right. Of course, it's our prayer that elementary and high school also be included. After all, it's not a truism that this is basic education. Dapat mauna yung basic talaga eh. So, importante.
Funded po yan sa DepEd budget, yung para sa mga elementary schools.
Yun na nga
Meron
yung...
silang 3 billion.
Yes, we already explored that last night at yun ang pinagpuyatan namin kagabi kasi kulang na kulang yung 3 billion. Talagang imposibleng mangyari na yung mga public elementary and high schools mako-cover ng 3 billion para sa IT. The other issue is that right now, every agency has its own IT system. Shouldn't this all be somehow consolidated? Kasi dun sa ating batas, ang sabi, dadaan lahat ng ICT plans sa DICT. Ngayon, the interfaces are very often incompatible with each other, and the different agencies are unable to communicate digitally with each other. This also impedes the ease of doing business. Is there a plan for all these agencies to finally interface and integrate their systems?
Yeah, the ICT is in full support of the E-Governance Act of Senator Bongo in this regard, Mr. President. Ang problema lang, kanya-kanya nga, and the ICT is doing its best to consolidate all the agencies. Ang problema nga, hindi pa nangyayari yung consolidation. But under the leadership of Senator Nasan, I think, or Secretary Nasan, I think the agencies will deliver from their end, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you very much. And may I simply manifest my full support as well as my pending bill. Earlier, it was stated that the Public Utilities Bill needs to be amended urgently. May I enjoin the leadership of the Senate to make this as a priority in as much as the telcos and other public utilities mock the 200 peso a day fine. Nakakatawa naman talaga yung 200 pesos a day. Kaya atin Senator Poe, yung version niya nasa 2 million a day. Nga, ginawa kong 10 million a day kasi ang yayaman naman itong mga public utilities, pinagtatawanan tayo at they go scot-free for all manner of violations. Thank you very much, Mr. Sponsor. Yun lang po.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Ralph Recto is the President pro tempore is next. Unmute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the distinguished sponsor, our good friend, Idol from Cavite, answer a few questions from this representation regarding the budget of the DICT?
Most willingly from the acknowledged expert of the Senate pagdating sa numbers. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, but you know, I have invested a lot. This representation has invested a lot. The former Senate President, who is now Minority Leader, Frank Drilon, our current Senate President Vicente Soto, and all of us here have invested a lot in creating the Department of Information Communication Technology. It took us 3 Congresses to get this passed into law. In fact, the former administration of President Aquino wanted to veto this. And it was during that time I requested the Senate President then na palapse into law na lang to. No? And that's how this department has been created. No? And if I do recall, as principal author and principal sponsor of this measure, the first mandate of the Department of DICT is to promote competition by way of its policy and regulatory, no? Promoting competition. No? The second is to provide free public Wi-Fi in public places, including universities and schools. Okay? The third is to improve e-government so that people are public and transact online with government, no? More so now during this pandemic. In addition to that, we know that the future, importante yung security of data. So cybersecurity issues as well, no? And finally, if we had more money to provide internet access to areas na walang connectivity. So these are the primary mandates of the Department of Information Communication Technology. No? I support the increase in the budget of the DICT. However, I'd like to ask a few questions regarding this program on the national broadband. Okay? You know, I liken the DICT to like our electric industry. Meron tayong generator, meron tayong transco, at meron tayong distribution. Pwede mong hatiin into 3. No? In the ICT, halos ganun din. Instead of the generating capacity of GenCo sa electricity, meron tayong mga submarine landing cable galing sa ibang bansa papuntang Pilipinas na may fiber optic. No? Yun yung ang tawag dito.
Submarine cable.
Yung mga submarine cable, but there's a term for it. Upstream. Okay? Yung parang GenCo yan. And then you have the mid-mile, yung parang transco. Okay? Today, PLDT Globe ang meron yung landing cables. Okay?
Landing.
I understand that Facebook has one now in Aurora, somewhere there, no? Okay. And then, yung parang GenCo yun. Okay? And then, Globe and PLDT also would have yung mid-mile. Kumbaga, transco. Okay? Transmission. Okay? And then, you have the distribution utilities. Kumbaga, sa kuryente, yung Meralco and all the other electric cooperatives. Okay? So, meron din distribution utility. Halimbawa, parang distribution utility din yung PLDT hanggang sa bahay. Ang Globe meron din. Ngayon may bago yung Converge. Okay, so parang distribution utility din, last mile. Okay, but there are many provinces, many barangays in the country na walang internet access. Palagay ko, dun dapat pumasok yung gobyerno para walang redundancy. Okay, not in the mid-mile, not yet, but first is access to the internet. Doon sa mga walang internet connectivity, if we're gonna allot money, why not in the last mile para yung walang access to the internet ay magkaroon ng access to the internet Yun ang unang-unang dapat natin gawin. Because ito bang national broadband, which part of those three sectors ang gagawin? Will it be the mid-mile? Parang gano'n ang pagkaintindi ko dito.
It will cover all, Mr. President, assuming that they get the proper budget.
Yeah. No, the 5 billion in this budget right now.
Yung phase 1 kanina, pero hindi kasama yung regions 1 and 2. Mag-extend yung phase 1 which starts from NCR all the way to Davao. But it will exclude some island provinces like Palawan. No, yun yung maabot ng 5.9.
Okay. So, in effect, mid-mile yan. Parang Transco. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct, Mr. President.
Okay. So, hindi aabot sa bahay yan.
Hindi aabot sa bahay.
Hindi
Gagastos pa rin yung mga LGUs
Okay.
kung gusto nilang makagamit nito.
Correct. Okay. Now, having said that, okay, wouldn't it be better that gamitin na lang whatever, whether it's 5 billion, 10 billion, 15 billion, doon missionary, parang halimbawa right now, yung mga island provinces na, I'm not saying only in the island provinces, but in the power sector, halimbawa, meron na tayong mga Genco, meron tayong Transco, meron tayong distribution utility in the main islands. Ang wala, yung missionary. So napukor naman ang gumagawa nun in the island provinces na walang Transco. So in the case of the internet, in the case of DICT, hindi ba dapat meron pa naman excess bandwidth capacity? Na dapat na lang hindi papasok ang Globe at Smart halimbawa in areas sa tingin nila hindi profitable. Doon ang trabaho ng gobyerno na doon dapat pumasok. In the municipalities in the countries, may highway na tayo eh. I-connect na lang yun doon sa mga munisipyo at sa mga barangay na walang access. Isa sa pinakamahalaga, sinabi nga ni Senator Amy kanina, yung mga eskwelahan. Because right now, 95% of our students are using module, not internet. But can you imagine if you could connect all the 40,000 elementary and secondary schools? That's 40,000 barangays. Last mile. And last night, we were discussing the budget of the education department. Okay? We know what the challenges are. The budget of the education department, 568 billion. To cover 25 or 22.5 million students, 95% of them walang internet na ginagamit, module lang. Walang face-to-face class, walang internet access. Okay? So, mas madali kung kabitan natin yung last mile, pag naglagay ka ng Wi-Fi halimbawa sa barangay or whatever contraption na pwedeng magamit ng Wi-Fi ng buong barangay, mas mapapakinabangan. Di ba dapat ganun yun?
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay. And then when we're done with that, then we can do backlink going to the mid-mile in the future. Ang importante ngayon yung access to the internet. Ngayon kung puro mid-mile pa lang ang gagawin natin, hindi rin mapapakinabangan ng tao, hindi aabot sa dulo hanggang household.
Right now, Mr. President, the ICT is requiring the telcos to submit an inventory of their presence. Nasa saan ba sila? So,
Correct.
para alam ng DICT kung saan sila papasok. In the meantime, they're looking for the...
Para walang redundancy, halimbawa, I support also yung instead na yung telcong gumawa ng tower, DICT, paupa pa nila, kikita pa sila. Okay? It doesn't make sense to me na halimbawa, 2 tower in one area, isang Globe, isang Smart. Limited yung kapital ng Pilipinas. Gagawa ka ng 2 tower in one area. Isang Globe, isang Smart. So may redundancy ka. So kung isang tower lang yan, at yun ang problema nila, assuming gobyernong gumawa nun, then pwede sila magkabit yan, umupa pa sa DICT. Kikita pa yung DICT. No? But that's another point. That's one other way.
National broadband, di ba?
But like I said, but you know, DICT also the one responsible. And they were thinking about this already to have these common pole agreements. No? So that's one. Okay. But like I said, to me, the most important is at this juncture is yung last mile, not the mid-mile. And then maybe we can work backward. Magkabit muna tayo sa bahay. And then we work backward if you want to promote competition with the private sector. Because right now you have two. May pangatlo na may binigyan natin ng prangkisa, hindi ito supposed to be. I have no problem with that for as long as China is up to 40% lang. Okay? Because that's what our constitution says. Okay? So we're promoting competition there. But having said that, kung kulang pa rin, then I don't mind government coming into the mid-mile again later on. Because you know, I remember when I was a kid, dati ang telecommunication, PLDT lang, gobyerno lang. Napakasama na serbisyo. And that's why in the 90s, we liberalized the telecom industry para pribado ang pumasok. And now we have better telecommunications, not perfect, but better telecommunication. And it's harder in the Philippines because we have 7,000 islands to interconnect. Okay? So that's why I'm saying that the role of government, our first role is parang missionary route. Parang sa kuryente. In fact, meron nga tayo sa electric bill natin. Sa Luzon tayo, nagbabayad tayo ng missionary route para makabitan ng kuryente yung sa mga areas na wala Parang tax din yun No? In fact, we can do that with telecom if we wanted to, although tataas yung presyo. But I'm saying now, if we have money and I'm willing to help out the DICT, we don't want this agency to fail. No? And malaki ang responsibility nila, lalo na sa cybersecurity. And there's going to be challenges this next decade. You have a technology war going on with the West and China on 5G, on AI. And then I think we are vulnerable to cybersecurity attack. Diba? So yan, malaking trabaho din yan ng DICT. And that's why they were created. So maybe the DICT can think about this. I will support an increase in their budget, pero yung maganda sana yung mapakinabangan ng tao kaagad. Through the areas na walang internet access. At yun, malaki ang tulong niyan in creating productivity immediately. Can you imagine if farmers had access to the internet on prices? Whether kailangan ba nila magtanim ngayon? Maganda ba yung panahon? Magkakabagyo ba through the internet? Makikita na nila? Or in the future, what would future prices of corn be? So on and so forth. No? Not to mention e-government. Diba? So, those are my concerns. So, maybe the DICT can think about that. No? Instead of investing now in the mid-mile na hindi mapapakinabangan immediately ng mga kababayan natin. So that's my concern, Mr. President. And then one final question, if I may. You know, ito natalisod ko lang because when I heard that government will use a corporation to buy the vaccines, yung PITC. Nung nakita ko yung, pinag-aralan ko yung, tinignan ko ngayon yung dokumento ng PITC. At natalisod, nagulat ako that there's 35 billion there. May Philippine Army, DILG, so on and so forth. Bureau of Fire, as we mentioned. No? Tapos nakita ko na ang DICT, may park sila doon na 3.5 billion. For what? Oh. Wala, nandito sa PITC. If they gave money to PICT, hindi mabid, my suggestion, ba't di na lang nila kunin ulit to para idagdag sa 5 billion? Kasi nakatenga lang to For what project was this supposed to be?
Yeah, according to them, Mr. President, nag-start sila 2016, wala pa silang back. So they relied on PITC as
Yes.
their procuring agency.
Yes.
Yes, they are taking seriously your suggestion because bumabalik sa treasury
Yeah.
pag hindi
Pero hindi,
nagagawa ng PITC.
Right now, they still have with PITC 2018, 2019, 3,534,234,750. The Philippine Army
Ano pa raw kayo doon?
has 5,487,588,589. Oh. So, ito, kunin na lang nila sa DICT, sa PITC, idagdag na natin to sa 5 billion dito. And willing naman ako, if you want, Mr. President, allot something for mid-mile
So
para may compromise tayo and allot something for last mile. Maybe something like that.
You're hitting the nail right on the head, Mr. President, Your Honor.
Yeah, para may pilot
According to
area
them.
tayo. Yes, oh.
Yeah, they acknowledge the 3.5 billion. Ito na nga yung sa mga pre-Wi-Fi and they are now pounding on PITC. They're
Yeah.
following up.
Yes.
On,
Alam mo, ang sinasabi ng PITC ngayon sa kanilang press release, kasalanan daw din ng agency dahil hindi sila nagbibigay ng terms of reference sa mga kung ano-ano. Nagtuturoan na sila. Okay? So,
Senator Recto will allow, and if
if-
Senator Recto will allow, just a quick interjection. Maliban sa last mile, bakit naman hindi kasali sa Pilipinas yung Region 1 and 2 dyan sa mid-mile? Thank you.
Okay. And that's why I'm saying, why not pilot na lang? O sige, mag-umpisa tayo ng mid-mile. Pero may last mile din kayo. Ito, may plus 3.5 billion. Pull it out from PITC. Kumikita lang sila doon ngayon ng interest income on that money as well.
ito na nga yung sinabi natin problema kanina, Mr. President, Your Honor. Yung pinrovide ng DBM sa kanila under the NEP, 2.7 billion para sa
Yeah.
free Wi-Fi.
Yes.
So kulang ng 3.4 billion. Now, since meron namang spectrum user fees
Yes. Sa
na kinokollect
NTC.
ang NPC,
Correct.
and as of 2019, merong available pang 5.9 billion pesos doon.
Yes.
So what we are suggesting is by way of a special provision probably, pwede natin makompel na mag-release instead of augmenting again from the under the GAA, yung
Yes.
requirement na 3.4. Kumuha na lang doon sa 5.9 na available doon sa sa
di ba?
collection. Ibigay dito para makompleto na yung free Wi-Fi na yan, Mr.
It's
President.
an off-budget item yan. We put that in the law eh. Yung sa spectrum fees eh. Di ba? Oo. But I don't recall right now, there's a purpose for that eh. What was the purpose for the spectrum fees ba? Yung collection natin doon. Hindi, gagamitin din dapat yun ng DICT naman eh. Di ba?
Yes, kinokolekta ng NTC.
Correct.
It's with an average of 3 billion a year.
Correct. And what was the purpose for that? Saan dapat gastusin yun?
Pang free Wi-Fi.
Correct. Oo. So, in fact, you don't need a special provision because that's in the law. We put that there eh.
Yes.
Okay.
Yung free Wi-Fi access act that we passed.
Yeah, but that's also in the DICT law. That's also in the DICT law. And then we pass another free public Wi-Fi. Redundancy lang ang ginawa natin doon for both.
Yeah, ang problema nga, Mr. President, kinakap ng DBM yung release. Under the law.
We mandate it. Oh, lagay tayo ng special provision. Yes, sir. I'm with you.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. Sa
Because
special
that's the
provision,
purpose.
Mr. President.
Yes, that's the purpose. Diba? Siguro kaya ginawa ng DBM yun dahil alam nila linagay sa PITC. Yung pera.
Kasi Mr. President, earmark yan eh.
O nga.
Yung collection ng spectrum user
Correct.
fees.
Yes, I
That's
know.
earmark.
For free public
For-
Wi-Fi. Correct.
Yes. Mr.
Pero sabi
President.
ng DBM, bakit sa PITC nyo linagay hindi sa PSDBM?
Isang linggo,
In fact, Mr. President, sa 2020 GAA, yung current year GAA natin,
Yes.
tinanggal na natin yan, yung cap na ini-impose ng DBM.
Okay, good.
It's already under, yeah,
Yeah.
this committee report. But in 2020, we also managed to delete.
Yes, I support that. One last question, Mr. President. Why did they choose PITC and not PSDBM? I just want to understand how the agencies are thinking.
Anong sagot doon? Bakit yun? The easiest response, Mr. President, will find out.
May marketing ba yan? Okay. Are they competing, the PSDBM and the PITC? Na dito niya dalhin sa amin? Ganun ba yun?
Yeah. In fact, even yung Philippine Army, as pointed out by the minority leader during the confirmation hearing kahapon sa CA,
5
merong 399.9 million
Yes.
na ibalik na sa Treasury.
Oo.
Because, yun nga, nung nagkwenta sila from 400 plus million, ang na-reduce yun sa 399. Again, that's between Philippine Army and PITC.
Yes. Philippine Army nga, 5.4 billion eh. Current outstanding eh. Ha? Hindi na ako magtatanong sa defense mamaya. At least alam mo na, Boss Bill, may 5.4 billion dito na doon. Navy, meron din. Okay. Anyway, so can the DICT seriously consider our proposal on the last file?
Kung ganun sila
Especially to connect yung mga eskwelahan natin para magamit sa barangay ng mga bata for their internet learning, para hindi lang puro module. Because this is my concern, finally. Imagine right now, sa DepEd, 568 billion ang budget, 25 million students, 95% module. We are spending 568 billion at ang matututunan ng mga bata is what? 10%, 20% of what they should learn this year? If we cannot improve yung blended learning,
Yeah.
di ba? Oh. So I think there should be some coordination with the DepEd as well para hindi sayang. No? So that is it, Mr. President. I thank our distinguished sponsor for being very candid and for taking his patience in answering some of our questions. And let me greet also my good friend, our good friend, Senator Gringo Onasan, who is now the second or third secretary of the DICT. Good afternoon, Greg. Maraming salamat, Mr. President. Thank you, sir.
Likewise, Mr. President.
All right, Majority Leader. Left are Senator Go and Senator Gordon. All the rest have either withdrawn or...
Maybe ask Senator Bong to join us.
Senator Bongo,
President.
is Senator Bongo online? Nakalog in but no video, no connection. What about Senator Gordon? The message is that if he's not here, the last, he waves.
Okay, Mr. President. Senator
Right.
Bongo, maybe we can ask for one more final call. Senator Bongo, are you online,
Yeah.
Mr. President? We'll ask him if he's online.
Mr. President, if no one who reserved is online, I reserved but I withdrew, but I can make a manifestation if no one else is available.
We'll allow the manifestation, and then if Senator Bongo is not online after you are done with your manifestation, we will entertain a motion to submit the
Yes, Mr.
budget.
President.
Go ahead, Senator Cayetano.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon to all. I would just like to follow through. The reason I withdrew because I was listening to the questions of our colleagues, and I think most of our concerns are quite identical, no? So I would really just like to further support the concern of Senator Recto about the need for DICT to closely coordinate with DepEd. To our good friend, the Secretary Honasan, we sponsored the budget of DepEd yesterday, and as Senator Recto mentioned, 95% of our students do not have access to internet. So as I was listening to the discussion, I'd just like to, maybe they can submit this in writing or have staff meet with us even during this time of the budget, because we want to see that whole picture. I was listening, and parang what Senator Recto drew from the discussion was that different agencies of government are in charge of different sectors. So parang the connectivity, parang nagtatransmit lang siya, pero yung actual access, the LGUs would also have to cough up their own investments. So worried lang ako, without very clear coordination, hindi rin the end result that we want, which is the students would have access, still might not happen. Parang ang daming butas nung plano natin. And I also want to, so that's one point, no? To really see that whole plan mapped out to ensure that at a certain time, and of course that's the soonest possible time, we will have access for the students so that we can improve their ability to learn, no, through online, through internet connectivity. But in connection with that, there was mention of last mile and mid-mile. I'm wondering if the last mile that this agency refers to is the same as the last mile of the DepEd. Kasi kung magkasabay yun, I will tell you now, kung magkaiba ho, was Senator Lacson responding na magkaiba?
Kasama rin yan, Your Honor. Kasama rin.
They are the same last mile. It's the same last mile.
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay, so on that note, hindi na pondohan yung last mile schools this year. So, paano ba yun? Walang eskwelahan doon, walang teacher doon. So, you know what I mean? Kailangan coordinated. Kaya tama rin yung sinabi ni Senator Recto na pondohan din natin yung mid-mile, no? I mean, so we have to attack this problem from all angles. Kasi baka mamaya, syempre, lahat tayo inisip natin, you know, the most vulnerable, di ba? The poorest of the poor. Doon ka magko-connect, and I'm not saying do not connect to them. I'm not saying that. Pero walang eskwelahan doon. So, medyo, does his sponsor get my point? I could hear him sort of laughing in the back, no? Di ba? Parang hindi coordinated.
No, Mr. President, more than the budget, ang interest ng DICT, yung plano, yung end-to-end plan ng mga agencies like the DepEd. So right now, they're currently following up yung mga submissions para magkaroon ng close coordination, Mr. President.
Okay, that's good to know naman. Sige, if maybe they can also take the lead na pukpukin sila kasi Mr. President, I handled the budget of a number of agencies, and a lot of them were asking for funding for their ISSP, for whatever program,
Yes.
whether it's enrollment of their members, etc. Pati, of course, alam naman ng ating sponsor, pati ang PhilHealth, no? And this requires this requires that the DICT endorses. Dapat may sign off ang DICT doon. So can we also ask them to confirm that they have the manpower and that they can act on this immediately? Kasi I felt so bad that I was not able to endorse the request because wala pang DICT approval. Matetenga lang yung funding nun, di ba, Mr. Sponsor, ganun yun. So
Yes,
ayaw
Mr.
natin yun.
President.
So, I could only move forward with the request with those who have already approval. And then nakikiusap yung iba na pending na daw or isasubmit na nila and they are assured it will only take a few days. So is there a way that we can find out, like, ano ba yun? Dekahon ba yan na kaya talaga yan in 15 days? I would assume it depends on the magnitude of the project, di ba? So just to reiterate that is so important because the law requires the ICT signing off on this. So I felt it would be irresponsible on my end as a chair na i-approve natin, we will set aside budget for that. Yung pala, wala pang endorsement ng DICT.
We can
So, yun
easily
lang
liken
yung-
it. Yeah, Mr. President, we can easily liken it to R&D. No? Yung DOST, ganun din, may R&D yung isang ahensya, iba't ibang ahensya. Hindi rin to consolidated yung effort, at least yung plan, hindi naka-converge. So I was proposing during the committee hearing of the DICT or DOST budget na baka pwede silang maging konduktor. But again,
Yes.
si Secretary de la Peña, baka raw pag-isipan na yung ini-interest niya yung budget, which he's not interested, no? Kasi nagkakaroon ng ganun dynamics, Mr. President. So probably there must be an improvement along this line, Mr. President. So yan, yung effort sa ng mga last mile, yung kasi kanya-kanya rin pondo. Yung R&D, kanya-kanya rin pondo. So walang convergence, Mr. President.
I agree. Sige, Mr. President, I will support whatever manner if his sponsor will initiate. Not, I agree that there has to be one agency that will coordinate these various interlinked projects so that we can also see where our funding is going. We can hold people accountable, walang duplication. Yun lang naman po. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Your
And
Honor,
see you
for your
later.
intervention.
All right, thank you. Majority Leader, is Senator
Thank
Bongo online?
No, Mr. President, so we can move and deem the budget submitted. But before that, there's just a manifestation for Senator Villanueva because he's busy, Mr. President, Mr. Sponsor, in relief efforts today in Bulacan. And he just asked me, he will no longer ask questions to DICT. He just wants to ask an update on his first-time Job Seekers Act. And I believe kasi yung bill niya, in charge yung DICT on the database and all. DICT is in charge of database and all, hoping it's working well. So maybe it's just a manifestation to our good members of the DICT that yung first-time Job Seekers Act ni Senator Villanueva, nagtatanong lang sa kamusta yung
Again,
status.
he already asked me that question. I already related to the ICT. Naghihintay sila ng submissions, again, from the agencies
All right.
concerned. We're going to give a feedback to Senator Joel pagka nandyan na yung kompleto information.
So thank you very much. Once again, thank you very much to our dear sponsor and particularly to the Secretary of the DICT, Tito Greg. It's good to see you. You look great. Pero at least you have some black hair left. I have only white hair na lang naiwan sa akin. But we welcome you back to your home here in the Senate. With that, Mr. President, I'm honored to move that the budget of the Department of Information Communications Technology, Office of the Secretary, Cybercrime Investigation Coordination Center, National Privacy Commission, and the National Telecommunications Commission be deemed submitted.
Any objection? Chair hears none. The budget of the DITC is deemed submitted.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask for 1 minute suspension to request the Department of National Defense to come in and take over the area.
It's 12:30. Would you like to
Okay, yes, Mr. President, I agree.
go for a break?
I forgot completely I had a chips.
We can
So,
suspend
I was hungry.
until, say, what, 1:30?
1:30, Mr. President, yes. I've lost track of the
Oh.
time. Mr. President, I move that we suspend session to 1:30 in the afternoon to allow our colleagues to have lunch. Of course, to remind our colleagues as well that the next budget that will be deliberated will be the Department of National Defense.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none. The session is suspended until 1:30 this afternoon.
Thank you very much.